All right, good morning, everyone. I see participants are coming in, so we'll give them a minute to populate the room.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, looks like we have a critical mass. If it's all right with everyone, I will go ahead and begin. We've got a full slate for this next hour and a half. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Tarver, and I want to welcome you to today's online discussion celebrating Black history, advancing civil rights in the United States and Pakistan. Thank you for joining us. Today's event, we couldn't do this without our partner, Quaid-I-Azam University here in Islamabad. And the program is scheduled to go for 90 minutes. And we're honored to have two extraordinary prominent speakers who will be with us discussing today's topic. We want you to be part of the program as well. We reserve the final part of the program for a question and answer session with the speakers. So at any point throughout, go ahead and submit questions at any time during using the chat box. Okay. Before we get to our featured speakers, though, we have opening remarks by Embassy Chargé d'Affaires Angela Aguilar and Quaid-I-Azam Vice Chancellor Dr. Muhammad Ali. I want to mention Ms. Aguilar has been called away out of the country and has provided us video remarks. Ms. Aguilar is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, rank of Minister Counselor. She has, before serving here in Islamabad, she was our acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs in the Department of State, and also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Diplomacy and Press in the Bureau. She's also served previously in Pakistan as counselor for public diplomacy at the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad and has served in a number of other assignments worldwide. As mentioned, her schedule required that she be out of the country, so she provided a video recording, which we'd like to go ahead and play now. If you could play the video.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I'm thrilled to be a part of this critically important discussion to commemorate Black History Month. This is a chance for all of us to take stock of progress and challenges we continue to face in civil rights advocacy in both the United States and Pakistan. Let me offer my special welcome to the students of Quaid-I-Azam University and to the members of the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network, whose voices will add so much to this discussion. It's also an honor to welcome renowned leaders in the field of race relations from both the United States and Pakistan, Dr. Clarence Lusane from Washington, D.C., and Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa from Islamabad. And my thanks to Vice Chancellor Dr. Muhammad Ali for his support for today's event. Just a week ago, on January 17th, we celebrated Martin Luther King Day. This annual commemoration of Dr. King's birth and life is an opportunity to re-examine his service and commitment to making civil rights a universal reality rather than platitudes on human equality. 59 years ago, from a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. King wrote that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. His words are as urgent and important today as they were in 1963. The idea for Black History Month began in 1915 as a campaign to recognize the achievements of Black Americans when historian and author Carter G. Woodson, the son of former slaves, founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. Dr. Woodson remains the only person whose parents were enslaved in the United States to obtain a PhD. In 1926, Dr. Woodson initiated what was then called Negro History Week, coinciding with the birthdays of social reformer and abolitionist Frederick Douglass and President Abraham Lincoln. Finally, in 1976, President Gerald Ford declared the month of February as African American History Month. Black History Month allows all of us in the United States and around the world to discuss the Black experience. We can recognize the struggles, contributions, and influence of African Americans throughout our nation's history, and hopefully acknowledge the obstacles that Black Americans continue to face in our country and our communities. Progress has not been smooth, and the United States has a long way to go in recognizing and protecting the fundamental civil rights of our fellow Black citizens. The murder of George Floyd in 2020 and so many other heartbreaking incidents in recent years are painful reminders to us all that our struggles against racism has far to go. We must all continue to work for reform in our education, criminal justice, healthcare, and economic systems so that they reflect our ideals more clearly. In this crucial work, we are fortunate to have committed partners across the globe, including here in Pakistan. There are nearly 8,000 Pakistanis studying in American colleges and universities this year, and hundreds more on a range of educational and professional exchange programs. As a result, Pakistan features the world's largest network of U.S. government exchange program alumni, numbering more than 32,000 members. The Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network's memberships include thought leaders from across the country, including one of our featured speakers today, Dr. Siddiqa. We are so lucky to have her and Dr. Lusain with us for today's program. Let me close as I began, by invoking the clarity of Dr. King's message on the imperative of respecting the rights of all citizens, a cause for which he gave his life. It is a cause we must continue to fight for each day and 12 months out of the year. But as he said so eloquently, we must accept finite disappointment, but we must never lose infinite hope. Thank you all.
Aaron?
Okay, let me unmute. Sorry. I'd like to introduce Vice Chancellor Ali at this time. Dr. Ali received his doctorate in biological sciences from the University of Wales in the United Kingdom and has over 32 years teaching, research, and administrative experience. He was appointed Vice Chancellor of Quaid-I-Azam University in 2018. He was elected Chairman of the Vice Chancellor's Committee by the Vice Chancellors of Pakistan in 2019. He's been awarded the Best University Teacher title 3 times by the Higher Education Commission in 2011, 2005, and 2002. He has supervised over 1,000 masters and 21 PhDs and published 219 research papers in scientific journals, garnering more than 5,000 citations. He's written 2 books and has presented papers in national and international conferences. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Vice Chancellor Ali.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Angela Aguilar and Charles D. Faird, U.S. Embassy Islamabad for our message. I myself am a member of the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network. I got an opportunity to do my postdoc in the United States, and also I was one of the awardee of the Fulbright to travel to India for a few months to do some research. All our distinguished guests, partners from the U.S. Embassy and Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network, faculty, students, and all other participants, I welcome you all to this event on a very important topic, that is celebrating Black history, advancing civil rights in the United States and Pakistan. Let me introduce Quaid-I-Azam University. Quaid-I-Azam University is a top-ranked university in this country, which is globally ranked at 378th position. It is also ranked in top 100 university in Asia, and we focus on producing a very high quality graduates. University enables students to understand the political, social, economic, and environmental problems during and after the pandemic. It engages them to respect and understand other ethnicities, cultures, and religions. Specifically, Area Study Center for Africa, North and South America is a teaching and a research center at the university dedicated to the study of regions of Africa and America in order to understand the people of these regions and to enhance bilateral relationships. The center also produced over 400 MPhil and 40 PhDs on various topics in American history, culture, literature, and politics. The center also conducts policy research and provides policy input to the government of Pakistan regarding Pak-U.S., Pak-Africa relations. The topic chosen for this conference, celebrating Black history, advancing civil rights in the United States and Pakistan, is very important in both American and Pakistani contexts, and the center also enjoys a long-standing partnership with the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad, as part of which it organizes an annual conference in American studies and participates in educational and cultural exchange programs. I'm also very happy that we are extending this partnership to co-organize African American History Month events this year, including an upcoming touring photo exhibition to highlight American democracy struggle for social justice during the 1950s and 1960s, and talks by American diplomats on the significance of African history in shaping U.S. democratic values, as well as today's event, which is on a very important topic. We are happy today to be the part of the event where we are joining the people from America, Africa, and Pakistan. And particularly, I would like to thank our speakers, scholars who will be taking part in this very important discussion. I want to thank U.S. Embassy in Islamabad for their extended partnership and for their commitment to promoting teaching, research, and community engagement at the Area Study Center in particular, and Quaid-I-Azam University in general. I would also like to thank the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network for organizing this event on a very pressing topic. This collaboration will not only address the shared concerns and issues of Pakistan and United States, it will also provide opportunities to foster mutual understanding between the people of two countries. I once again thank all our collaborators, participants, and I wish you a very successful event today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Ali. I very much appreciate those words. And with that, I'd next like to introduce our featured speakers. Dr. Clarence Hussain from Washington, D.C., and Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa from here in Islamabad. Dr. Hussain is a full professor and former chairman of Howard University's Department of Political Science. He's an author, activist, scholar, lecturer, and journalist. For more than 40 years, he has written about and been active in national and international human rights, anti-racism politics, diaspora engagements, U.S. foreign policy, democracy building, and social justice issues. He earned a BA in communications from Wayne State University in Michigan, and both a master's and PhD from Howard University in political science. He has lectured on U.S. race relations and human rights in Pakistan, as well as more than 60 other countries. He is a prolific writer, author of 8 books on human rights, the United States and Black politics, globalization, and other related topics. His most recent book is The Black History of the White House, and his next book, $20 and Change, Harriet Tubman versus Andrew Jackson and the Future of American Democracy, will be published later this year. Dr. Siddiqa is an assistant professor at the Area Studies Center for Africa, North, and South America at Quaid-I-Azam University in Islamabad. She taught at public and private universities in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa between 2007 and 2012. Her teaching and research interests include post-colonial studies, African American literature, African American women's writing, Pakistani women's writing, literary theory, feminism, and English language teaching. Dr. Siddiqa earned a master's in African American studies from Boston University in 2010, while on a Fulbright scholarship. She also earned a PhD in English studies from the University of Durham in the United Kingdom in 2017 on a Commonwealth scholarship. She's worked on various academic and social awareness programs with USAID, the British Council, the UN Development Program, the Australian Agency for International Development, the HIV/AIDS Surveillance Project, and other organizations. So as we agreed before the program began, Dr. Hussain will lead off with a 15-minute presentation from the U.S. perspective, followed by Dr. Siddiqa with a 15-minute presentation from the Pakistani perspective. Then we'll move on to the question and answer portion. Remember, please submit your questions at any time through the chat function. And with that, if I can turn things over to you, Dr. Hussain.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aaron. And first, I also want to offer my thanks to Ms. Angela and to Dr. Ali and to Dr. Siddiqa for pulling this together. As has been mentioned, the issue of civil rights and fairness, I see as a global issue. It certainly has had its particular expression in the United States, and we'll talk about that relative to African Americans, but I would underscore strongly that these are issues and challenges all over the world. And one of the most important things that we can do is learn from each other and engage with each other. As Aaron mentioned, I did have the great pleasure about 10 years ago or so to come to Pakistan, to Islamabad, to Karachi, and to Lahore, and to have discussions about civil rights and human rights. And I thoroughly enjoyed the engagement and the time to really get a chance to not only share some of the experiences of what has happened in the United States, but also to about the experiences in Pakistan. And so I really look forward to this discussion continuing, and particularly the discussion to follow our presentations with Dr. Siddiqa. And then lastly, I will also want to offer opportunities for both students as well as Dr. Ali and Dr. Siddiqa, if you ever have the opportunity to come to Washington, D.C., to come to Howard University and have a chance to also engage with our students and with our faculty. So for my presentation, there are 5 points that I want to make that sort of collectively frame how I'm thinking about civil rights and the movement for racial and social justice today. So the first point is to argue that while the movement has advanced, it has been a movement that has been up and down. It has had retreats as well as progress. And it's important to understand that history because each stage of that history has given the ability to be able to weather when there have been retreats. From 1619, when two British ships landed in an English colony and brought off the ships what they wrote down as 20 and odd Negroes, about 20 to 30 Africans who had been captured probably along the west coast of Africa near Angola, and became the first people of African descent to be in English colonies. Most of these individuals were would end their lives enslaved. Some were able to freedom at some point, but that period from 1619 going forward is when this struggle begins. And it begins and goes through the founding of the country in the 1770s with the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and then the founding of the country and the Constitution in the 1780s. The opportunity at that point to end slavery did not happen. And so we had another 60 plus years where slavery continued. Now, in that period in the North, there were movements in support of not only freeing people who were enslaved, but for civil rights for free Black people who were in places like Massachusetts, New York, Delaware, states that were in the North. The institution of slavery came to an end as a result of the Civil War, as there were not only people who were enslaved who wanted to be free, but a very strong abolitionist movement that included people who were white in the North. This eventually led to a civil war, a very costly civil war, but at the end of that war in 1865, slavery was brought to an end in the United States. Now, what's important is that unlike slavery in pretty much everywhere else in the world, when slavery ended in Colombia or in Cuba or in Brazil, people who were enslaved were basically left on their own. In the United States, however, we had a period called Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877. And in that period, the federal government, primarily through Congress, took responsibility for integrating people who had been newly freed into U.S. society. This meant schools were built in the South to educate people who had been in slavery. Now, this is important because these were not only schools in which Black people could attend, but for the first time in many places for white people to attend. So slavery, post-slavery period, in that instance, benefited not just Black people, but other people as well. Also, the federal government made loans to individuals so that they could buy property, they could open small businesses. And critically, you had Black people who began to run for political office and become engaged in electoral politics. And for the period of the 1870s, as Reconstruction developed, you had individuals not only as mayors, city councils, and state governments, but you had Black people in the US Congress, including people who had earlier actually been enslaved. And so you had a tremendous integration and a tremendous flow of democracy in the United States in a period that I think has been vastly understudied in terms of what it has meant in US history. That period did not last. Reconstruction was overthrown. And by the time you get to the 1890s, early to 20th century, Jim Crow is in place. And that doesn't come to an end until 1965 or so, when the victories of the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, other policies and laws formally ended legal segregation. Now, we have a lot of people who are alive today who lived through that period. In fact, when I was about 5 years old, at the end of the 50s, I visited my grandparents in the South, in Alabama, in Birmingham, as Ms. Angela talked about earlier, where segregation legally existed. My sister and I had to go into the back doors of places. We were called the N-word, and it was all legal, and it was all what people experience on a day-to-day basis. So we are not that far from when formal legal segregation ended, but it did come to an end. There were victories, and then there were advances, and what has been referred to as the second Reconstruction, where there wasn't an effort at every level of society to move forward on these questions. However, we've also saw retreat. We've also saw some setbacks. And many of the things that Dr. King talked about, some of the disparities in education, in criminal justice, in housing, and in healthcare still continue and remain some of the challenges that we have to face now. The second point I would raise is that historically, racial discrimination in the US, while it has been individual and it has been groups that have acted outside of the law, like the Ku Klux Klan, for example, it's important to also understand that laws on housing, employment, education, criminal justice were vastly different for whites in the United States versus people of color. And I want to emphasize that because there were institutional ways in which discrimination happened that went beyond just individual behavior. And the legacy of those institutional systems of discrimination reverberate all the way to here in 2022. When we look at disproportionality in areas like criminal justice, for example, or we look in terms of housing around the United States, a lot is rooted in not necessarily particularly individuals who did not want to sell their house to Black people, or to uneven ways in which Black people have been arrested and incarcerated, but that there have been institutional systems in place, even when you had the end of segregation and African Americans and other people of color in positions of power, those disparities have continued, and continued because often we have not addressed the institutional nature of the ways in which discrimination can often unfold. My third point, progress on race has always been linked to progress or retreat on democracy in the United States. Now, one way to look at the Jim Crow era, the era of legal segregation, is through a racial lens. But another way is also to look at that period from the end of the 1890s all the way through the 1960s, is as a period of different rights in the country, a sort of racial authoritarianism, where in US society, in that period, you had some in society who had full voting rights, full civil rights, full social and economic ability, cultural respect, while you had millions of others who did not. And that was by law and that was by practice. Now, democracy continues to have this nexus with issues around race and racial justice. For example, in Washington, D.C., where I live, the citizens of my city, there are 700,000 individuals in Washington, D.C. Historically, the city has been majority and overwhelmingly Black for at least the last 70 years or so. It has changed, but it's still close to being majority Black. People in Washington, D.C. do not have full voting rights in the U.S. Congress. Every state in the country has 2 senators. Washington, D.C. has none. Every state in the country has representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives. Washington, D.C. has what's called a delegate, which is an individual who cannot vote. So this is an unresolved area of democracy. Washington, D.C., as everywhere else in the country, deserves full representation and full voting rights and full rights beyond that as everywhere else in the country. Another example, the Electoral College. The United States elects presidents by a system by which it's not the popular vote, but the votes that are tallied that come from each state that are allocated in a specific way, and whoever wins a majority of those votes becomes president, even if that person does not win a majority of the votes overall. And that is out of line pretty much the rest of the world, pretty much our own experiences. If we're in high school and someone's running for class president, whoever wins the most votes becomes the class president. So this is another area of democracy that needs to be resolved, I would argue, but it's also very much tied to the way the Electoral College bends towards smaller, less diverse states in the country, given a disproportionate weight on the Electoral College towards states that tend to be overwhelmingly white and tends to, in a sense, disenfranchise states where there are significant and large numbers of people of color. A quick third example I would give is around felony disenfranchisement. Because states are given great latitude in how they address voting, there are states where you're able to fairly easily, and if you're an ex-felon, if you committed a crime, you went to prison, you paid your debt to society, you get out, in many states, you get your voting rights back if you had lost them, and it's easy to vote. In some states, it is extremely difficult to vote, even if you paid your debt. And what this sets up then is a 2-tier system of who has voting rights. And because of the disproportionate number of African Americans, Latino in the prisons, it disproportionately impacts on those communities. My fourth point, the US is changing rapidly in terms of demographics. And as a result, that has generated fear in some parts of the country. There are many places around the country that are where no one racial group has a majority. And it's continually to evolve along those lines. Now, these demographic changes can be seen as an opportunity, that it allows the country to become more diverse and there's benefits to that, or it can be seen as a threat. And unfortunately, what we're witnessing are those who want to take this changing environment and use it to create dissension and discord and racial prejudice. And so, but the demographics are not going away. And in less than 25 years, overall in the country, there will not be a majority of any particular racial group. So it becomes extremely in the interest of the country to address and to recognize the benefits of changing diversity, both in terms of immigration as well as in internally to the country. And then the fifth point I would raise around this is that the movement for civil rights has evolved into a movement for intersectional rights. And by that, I mean the civil rights movement of old, whether it was in the 1920s or 1950s or 1960s, importantly, but narrowly, is mainly on voting rights and civil rights directed to African Americans and other people in general. It did not address many other rights that were important. And what we've seen evolve as we're here now in the 21st century is that the civil rights movement very much sees itself as not only looking at issues of racial justice, but issues of gender equality, rights for the LGBTQ community, addressing issues of environmental discrimination and climate change, looking at issues of economic fairness, and also looking at issues of immigrant rights. And all of these now are integrated into a web of concerns that are addressed by these movements. And this, I think, was most visible in 2020 when we saw the protests that erupted in the party initiated by the killing of George Floyd, but quickly ballooned into a national and global movement for not only racial justice, but for justice on a range of issues, many of which I just mentioned ahead of time. So I'm very hopeful that in the spirit of Martin Luther King and the movement to be hopeful about bringing change, that we will continue along those lines. And where we are in 2022, both on the young side with the Black Lives Matter movement, and on a more experienced side with individuals in the civil rights movement, in unity and in alliance with others, that we will be moving forward in the days ahead. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing Dr. Siddiqua. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Hussain. Some strong food for thought there. I'm sure our audience will have some follow-up questions for you. We'll get to those in a bit. But if I could now turn to Dr. Siddiqua. Dr. Siddiqua, floor is to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm absolutely delighted and honored to be part of this conversation that's so close to my heart. I would like to thank Jose de Ferrer U.S. Embassy, Ms. Angela Agler for her personal support of this event. I would also like to thank Honorable Vice Chancellor, Quaid-I-Azam University, Director and Chairman, BOG Area Study Center, for his support of this event and for personally, for taking time out for these events. Special thanks to Professor Clarence Lucene for agreeing to speak to us at such an odd time. It's past midnight in DC right now. So thank you very much. And also thanks to the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network for bringing us all together once again. Thank you, Professor Lucene, once again for providing an insightful overview of not only the struggle of African Americans for equality and social justice, but also how that foregrounds their resilience, their perseverance, and their miraculous journey of healing. This healing power of storytelling is what has touched me most deeply in my engagement with narratives of American and Pakistani history from a marginalized perspective. And this is what I'm going to dwell on today, the power of storytelling. Discussions around civil rights and liberties in the context of public policy are absolutely critical. But what is equally critical is the act of narration, storytelling, that paves the way for these discussions. We need to tell our stories. We need to have our voices heard, our narratives of struggle, resistance, and healing told to keep the conversation going. So while speaking within the broader context, I want to shift focus towards narrative, towards literature, towards the humanities. How can they help us advance this conversation of social justice? I will begin with my own story. As an alumna of the Fulbright program, and the story of my encounter with America. It was in the spring of 2006, soon after I had completed my bachelor's in English and was exploring the options of pursuing graduate studies in the U.S., that one of my professors who had recently returned from the U.S. shared his copy of Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave with me. Having received my English literature degree from University of Peshawar, where American literature or history was not on this part of the syllabus, I immediately knew I had discovered a parallel literary world. Mesmerized by Douglass's melodic rhetoric, I was also intrigued by the strange alternative image of the US that the slave narrative portrayed, which significantly challenged my image of America based on my virtual encounters via American TV and cinema. The America that I read about here stood in stark contrast to the America that I had come across in my brush with Jefferson's autobiography. The America of the 4th of July, of the city upon the hill, of the American dream. An America that I wasn't so familiar with. An America that was haunting the America that I was familiar with. An America that America itself was grappling with. I was spellbound, mesmerized, immediately hooked, captivated by a then inexplicable desire to explore this further. I decided to write my Fulbright application proposal on slave narrative, focusing on Frederick Douglass and later Harriet Jacobs. During my reading for the proposal, I delved deeper and deeper into the African-American history, the African-American experience, Black intellectual thought. And the more I read, the more it dawned upon me that it was not that America wasn't exceptional, but that it was exceptional in all sorts of ways. That America was exceptional was not a myth, except that American exceptionalism manifested itself in a variety of ways, sometimes at variance. While I found the slave narrative exceptional, I also found the history of the African-American struggle against white supremacy truly exceptional. While America's long-standing investment in the ideals of freedom, equality, and opportunity is exceptional, its constant struggle with systemic racism, inequality, and racialized violence is also exceptional. The Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movements have struck home this realization more than ever. However, given the occasion, I want to infuse some optimism into this. When we start with a consciousness of our fallibility, narratives of exceptionalism can become narratives of deliverance. That America is exceptional is evident in the history of African-American struggle for equality through the beginnings of colonization to the Civil War, the Reconstruction era, the Civil Rights Movement, and now the Black Lives Matter movement. That's the America that I've come to admire. While America has a long way to go, as Miss Angela Aguilar said earlier, the desire to correct this history is what is exceptional and why we have gathered here today. So then how do we celebrate Black History Month? Do we revisit Black history from the dominant perspective, or do we subvert that dominant perspective? That is why narrative is so crucial. Going back to my research proposal and fast forward the tortuous graduate studies application process, I was accepted into the African American Studies program at Boston University. During the round of introductions on my first day of classes at BU, my Black women writers class professor couldn't quite contain her surprise at seeing a Pakistani girl come to the US to study Black America. Her question echoed in my mind for a long time to come. What brought you here to the African American Studies program? She said. It was a simple yet a profound question. Notwithstanding my love of literature and the desire to engage with a different literary landscape, the question propelled me to look for the answer that had been there all along. The journey that I embarked on that day is closest to my heart. I was there to listen to their stories of African American men, women, and children. And I was there to share my story and to explore the intersections in our stories of struggle, of resilience, of healing. I was there to find grounds of mutual collaboration so we can learn how to arrest that cycle of history that continues to oppress certain others. For me, the Black experience in America paralleled various constellations of the post-colonial experience that I lived. Although African-American history of slavery, the civil rights movement, and the contemporary race relations in the US reflect a discrete trajectory, they are anchored in a historicized subjugation of certain others. These shared historical experiences of subjugation, marginality, displacement, and dispossession not only give rise to the narratives of resistance, but also foreground the possibility and the urgency for politics of convergence. So for instance, how do African-American and post-colonial experiences intersect? What sites of resistance and collaboration do these intersections generate? Sharing individual and collective narratives through literary and cultural studies brings us one step closer to recognizing our mutual realities and our collective responsibility. Black History Month ensures we hear Black voices that were silenced and Black stories that remain unheard. It is about telling your story, taking responsibility for your story. And that's what's exceptional about America. And that's something we in Pakistan can learn and can connect with, can learn from the African-American story of civil rights and connect with. Coming to Pakistan, I will not delve deep into the civil rights scenario in Pakistan. A cursory look at the figures tells us that we have a long way to go and that we're not doing very well on indicators. We cannot turn a blind eye to facts. And even if we do, every now and then we are confronted with an incident that jolts us out of our complacency and hits home the validity of statistics. For each Trayvon Martin, we have a Mashal Khan. For each Tatiana Jefferson, we have a Noor Muqaddam. For each George Floyd, we have a Priyantha Kumara. What we perhaps don't have is an All Lives Matter movement. And that is why telling stories is so important. A brief look at the rights organizations' figures tells us that we have a lot of turf to cover to protect the rights and freedom of our people. Religious intolerance, unfair labor practices, vigilant violence are rampant. Religious minorities, women, children, transgender, and differently abled people continue to face persecution. Domestic violence, rape, honor killing, acid attacks, child abuse, child marriage, forced marriage are serious problems. But that's part of the story. We also want to tell our stories of resistance, for they can become acts of deliverance. We are passing the Criminal Law Amendment Bill 2021 that will criminalize enforced disappearances and seek accountability. We've passed the historic Transgender Persons Act 2018, one of the most progressive laws in the country's histories, as well as globally, perhaps. The Harassment of Women at Workplace Amendment Bill 2022 is another historic development for women in transgender communities in Pakistan. Despite hitches, we've made history by appointing the first female Supreme Court judge in the judicial history of Pakistan. Our Me Too movement is still nascent, but it has given us the Zainab Alert Bill. Our Aurat March draws a lot of ire, but we continue to hold it. The reaction to the lynching of Priyantha Kumara from both the civil society and the state, and voices like Malik Adnan, who tried to save him, reinforce the values of peace and tolerance that should be part of our stories. Let this lynching be a moment of our All Lives Matter movement. Let's take responsibility for our story and let's reshape it. So long as we keep telling stories, change is a matter of time. Me Too movement started with a story or some stories. Each semester that I teach African American literature, some of my students tell me that no book of history or politics ever familiarized them with the African American experience as did these narratives of resistance and redemption. And then we ask, what value do the humanities have? What do they yield? How can we measure the yield? Literature teaches us to understand the other by confronting the other within us. That's the relationship between voice, narrative, and ethics. That's the relationship between literature and human rights. Judith Butler makes an interesting case for critical thinking as the foundation of nonviolence, and I would like to quote that. The first step towards nonviolence is to begin to think critically and to ask others to do the same. An active and sensate democracy requires that we learn how to read well, not just texts, but images and sounds, and to translate across languages. Unquote. So why do we tell the story of a people? How do we tell the story of a people? I will answer by quoting Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And Fehmi Darya's Pakistani poet, come let us create a new lexicon, wherein is inserted before each word its meaning that we do not like. And let us swallow like bitter potion the truth of a reality that is not ours. Let us all tell our stories. Let us tap the power of shared storytelling to connect us with our past in order to reshape our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siddiq. That was quite a bit, and as a former English Lit major, it's inspiring to hear somebody give the clarion call for us working in the humanities. So thank you. I wanted to ask a real quick question, if I could, to Dr. Lusane, you mentioned at your fourth point, the demographics are changing rapidly. And do you see that as a larger source for optimism, or is that going to be more of a source for conflict in the United States?
Well, I think it will be both, actually. So I think there are many people who embrace the diversity. If we look at data, for example, the increase in people marrying outside of their quote race has actually grown. And if you look in popular culture, whether it's TV commercial, whether it's films, whether it's areas in which there's opportunities to see communities of people, these communities are very, very much integrated. So I think that there's a feeling in the society that really does embrace diversity. But there's also a counter to that. And while I think those numbers may be relatively small, they can be exploited and have a much greater impact than the numbers would indicate. And so, I think both of those trends are there, and the question will be, which will prevail as we move forward towards more and more diversity.
That is the question. Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Dr. Siddiqa, would you be willing to talk about changing demographics in Pakistan? Did we lose Dr. Siddiqa? All right. Well, she'll certainly be, and if she's off, she'll certainly come back shortly. If I may go forward, we do have some questions in the chat box we've already received. We'll go ahead and get started. I think the first one here, thankfully, is to you, Dr. Hussain. Maz Ali asks, how do you think religion and the church were so important in the lives of free and enslaved Blacks? What role do you think religion played in the lives of slaveholders and other proponents of slavery?
It was and continues to be absolutely central. The leadership in the Black community in the slave period, both in the areas of slavery, but also outside of the areas of slavery in the North, often that leadership were religious leaders, ministers who played a very, very critical role. And that continued all the way up until now. Of course, we all know about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, but at a more local level, the church has been a very central mobilizing and organizing instrument to address these issues. And that's not going to change, I don't think, at all. And so it's been very, very important. And I would also add that the religious aspect has also been instrumental in having an international of these issues. And we know that, around the globe, Christian communities, Islamic communities, other religious communities have bonded and been helpful in addressing these concerns as they impact people around the world. But thank you for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Got a question here for Dr. Siddiqa. Dr. Hussain mentioned a few key events that prompted change for the African-American community in the United States. Do you feel that Pakistan has had similar key events in its history? If not, what would it take to prompt similar change?
I think during my talk as well, I did mention some of the events that have taken place and that have brought about change. And specifically with reference to, the international Me Too movements that started, because gender is a very important issue in our context. So with that, I think in the aftermath of that, and we had the Zainab Alert bill, which was I think historic. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that we are passing or have actually passed the Harassment of Women at Workplace Amendment Bill. So 2022, it was just, I think, on 15 January. So I think these incidents that happen, as I said, they jolt us and they do bring about that sort of change. It is slow, but it is happening. And that's why I underscored again and again the importance of narrative, of talking about things. So yes. I also had a question for Professor Lucene. Not exactly a question, I mean, I'm more of a comment. And I would like him to respond. So each year there is there's a theme for the Black History Month. And if I'm not wrong, this year it's Black Health and Wellness. I would really want, him to speak a little bit about that.
First, let me say, now that Dr. Siddiq is back, that I really resonated with your remarks. I think this notion of storytelling and the power of it just can't be emphasized strong enough. My own experience is my understanding of the struggle of Black people didn't start from reading books, didn't start from watching movies. It started from the stories that were passed down by my parents and my grandparents. My grandmother was very active in the civil rights movement. She actually worked with Dr. King. She was on the Pettus Bridge, those famous marches in 1965. And so these were stories that we heard growing up. And, we didn't have a broader context, but they were meaningful and shaped how me and my sisters thought about the world. And from that period up to now, those stories have been important. Bell Hooks, who passed recently, once said, memory can restore our faith and renew our hope, but those memories have to be passed on. So when you talk about how narrative and storytelling are so critical in building these movements, sustaining these movements, getting them through the rough patches, I absolutely think you're absolutely right on that. In terms of the Black History Month, it manifests very differently all over the country. And so some people pick up, the theme, or, there's an effort at a kind of national theme, but often it's very much what's going on in local communities and ways in which, there are efforts to try to tie and remind people how, this particular moment we're in echoes the past. But I have a question for you, if I may. May I ask a question? Dr.
Yes,
Siddiq?
please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that I didn't talk about at all, but I think is critical, is the way in which social media is shaping discourses and practices around race. And there's a positive side of it, in the sense that there's more opportunity to kind of engage and see, but there is clearly a negative side of it, and a way in which extremism can be amplified. And I'm wondering how, in your context, these issues are manifesting, and what kind of responses there are to try to address that issue.
I absolutely agree. It has both as positive and negative. As you rightly mentioned, the extremism and the rise in that is also an aspect of it, which we obviously experience here in Pakistan as well as it is done elsewhere. But I also think, though I personally don't use social media, but I do think it has the kind of power when it comes to, again, narrative storytelling that we probably did not have before, or that the agency that it gives you. So while I do understand the negative part, but I think I personally look at it as a very positive phenomenon. I think it's very empowering for some of us.
Yep.
I would like to hear your opinion on this as well.
My opinion on it? I don't use social media a lot. I have to because it's part of my job. You can't kind of escape these days. The university has web pages and Facebook pages, and so you kind of can't escape it. But I very much minimize my activity, not only because of the what be kind of exploited, but also I think the social media companies, their whole thing is that their interests often facilitates problems more than kind of resolves problems. So as much as I can kind of distance, I try to.
Oh yeah, there's that whole conversation, of course, about the social media companies. I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question, Dr. Siddiqa. That was pretty useful. I was wondering if I'd like to pose part of your question to Professor Lusane. You quoted that the first step toward nonviolence is to think critically. Professor Lusane, do you think that there's sufficient numbers? There are sufficient numbers of people in the United States who think critically that quote resonates, or is that something that we still need to work on?
We definitely need to work on it. And again, not to beat up on social media, but it can replace people thinking critically. So we see it with the anti-vax movement, and there are other manifestations. I do think though that there is plenty of space for developing more critical perspectives on the lives that we live, and there are individuals who work on that kind of every single day. And I'd like to hear Dr. Siddiqa on this, like with my students, for example, who are absolutely wedded to social media, and they sort of attached to their phones, but under the right circumstances, they will break from that, and they will engage in issues that are dear to their hearts. And it's finding ways in which we can be in touch with what people are concerned about and engage them with those concerns that builds critical thinking skills. I struggle with this with my students. I would like to know how Dr. Siddiqa deals with this, but I think it's, these are broader issues outside of our classrooms.
Thank you, Dr. Lusane. Dr. Siddiqa, would you care to comment on your sense of critical thinking in Pakistan?
Oh, well, we certainly have a long way to go as well in there, but I'll talk about it from my own perspective. So, when I'm teaching my classes, I always tell my students that is what the purpose of my classes. I want them to develop critical thinking, and I think all of my colleagues and we all do that in our respective classes. Our focus, I always tell students that you're in research degrees, so your focus should be developing critical thinking and not getting this or that grade. So yes, there's a lot of room for improvement, but this is I think some of us are conscious of this, and we are consciously working on it. And the fact that, and that's, as Professor Hussain was talking about his students, being so addicted to social media. And so I think that's where, because young people, use that platform. So I think that's the positive aspect that I was talking about. We can use that for again, critical thinking, for bringing change, for having conversations that we probably couldn't have before, or can't have in some of the other spaces. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Aaron. Aaron, you're on mute.
I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Too many screens up. This is a question for you, Dr. Hussain. What will it take for the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C., to actually get full voting rights, in your opinion?
Great question. It's a challenge. It has been a struggle in this city for at least 8 decades. That there has been an effort, what we call the DC statehood movement, for DC to become a state, or at least have all of the rights of other states. It has been difficult, in part because it would change the balance in Congress. So political partisanship often kind of comes into the mix. And the battle is kind of known outside of Washington, D.C. You all probably know as much about it just from what I've said as people around the United States. It's just not an issue that most people in the country are either aware of, or to the degree they are, that it comes anywhere near kind of a priority concern. But here in DC, we fight the fight, and we've had excellent representation from our delegate in Congress on these concerns. I hope that we're able to make this expansion into democracy for people in DC, but we're going to keep fighting the fight. And again, it's really difficult to see us winning overall, but incrementally, there have been some gains over the years.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hussain. Hoping to have my microphone on now. This one's for Dr. Siddiqa. You mentioned that Black History Month allows the world to hear about the African-American story of civil rights in the United States. But are there U.S.-Pakistan programs that can focus on this issue as well?
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't hear part of the question, sorry.
I will read that again. Yes. You mentioned that Black History Month allows the world to hear about the African-American story of civil rights in the United States. Are there U.S.-Pakistan programs that talk about this and focus on this issue?
You mean the Black History Month?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. No, not that I know of. No, but I think, I mean, if I got your question right, what you mean is that, do we have such programs here, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, so Area Study Center has recently started collaborating with the U.S. Embassy Islamabad, and we are, as our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Ali mentioned, we are going to have a couple of talks, and also we are co-organizing an exhibition. So I think this is a good start. We are starting this year, and we will continue this partnership to hold such events here as well. Can I also ask another, not question, but just a comment to Professor Lucene, and I would like him to respond. So I would like him to share something about Howard University with our students, because it has its own, very rich history in the context of, African Americans. So if you could talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that question. So Howard University comes out of that period I talked about, Reconstruction. Howard was founded in 1867. It wasn't the first, actually, Black university. We refer to them as HBCUs, historically Black universities. So Howard was actually not the first, but it became the biggest. And from 1867 to now, it has evolved into a full university that not only gives degrees at the undergraduate level, bachelor's degrees, but also master's degrees and doctoral degrees. There's also a medical school, a dental school, a pharmacy school, a law school, a school of business, as well as school of education. We have about 10,000 or so students, fluctuates between probably 10 and 11,000. 85, 90% are Black, but we have students from there are other students who are white, students who are Latino, as well as we have a significant number of students internationally. I don't remember any students from Pakistan, but we've had significant number of students other parts of the Middle East. We're in the center of Washington, D.C., which is very advantageous, particularly for my area, which is political science, because there is Congress, there's the State Department, international organizations, the embassies. I direct our program in international affairs, and so we very much get our students off campus, and we will have dinners at the embassies, or we have meetings, or students will attend talks. Again, I invite anyone to come and visit us. We're very open to having people come and give talks or just to visit. And so Dr. Siddiqui, please come and visit, and you're welcome anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll just put in a plug now that if any of the members in chat are interested in perhaps studying at Howard University or visiting or anything, or any of the other 4,000 accredited universities in the United States, please reach out to us here at the embassy. This is part of what we do. We're very much interested in promoting education opportunities in the United States. So with that, for our next question, Cindy Seiss asked a question to Dr. Lucene. How will society change if states are banning the teaching of the true Black American history?
Excellent question. So what the questioner is referring to is that there has been a pretty vigorous movement in the last year or so to ostensibly ban race teaching critical race theory, which is an approach to looking at the law through a racial lens that basically is taught in law school. However, it has become the means by which efforts to attack any teaching that has to do with race or ethnicity from being taught at the primary and secondary level in the elementary schools and in middle schools and high schools. And it's a dangerous idea, but one with a long history. If you go back to many decades, there's always been efforts to ban certain kinds of teaching, whether it was teaching about unions, whether it was teaching about countries outside of the United States. There's a long history, but there is a pushback from educators, from teachers unions, from individual teachers, and from students. Students are demanding, in fact, that these issues not be ignored and that they are taught. And so some states have passed laws against teaching certain ideas, but those probably cannot sustain their, in addition to there being lawsuits, there are teachers that are just simply refusing to do it. And they've found ways to get around some of these laws. But there is an effort to not teach some of these ideas. Remember I talked about 1619 at the beginning of my talk, which was the year when Africans first came to the English colonies. There's an effort to not teach about that, which of course is, you can't erase that history even if you try. The history is there whether you teach it or not. And so I think that, we will see this effort like the ones in the past rise, but these efforts also eventually fail.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hussein. And I can speak from my own experience that things are certainly better in that respect than it was when I was in high school. And AP American History, our textbook in Louisiana was all about states' rights. So hopefully the students are getting past that stuff. Anyway, let's see. Our next question from Tausif Ali Shah. We know that the American president was the most powerful person in the world, so Barack Obama came from the Black community. Can we say that somehow discrimination of Black and white all over the world, specifically in America and Europe, was ended or not ended? And is there work a little bit for that discrimination? I think the question is with I'll try to restate it. With former President Obama being elected president in the United States, is discrimination over? I think I know what answer you're going to give, but that's the question.
No, I appreciate the question. And you can certainly argue that the election of a Black person to the U.S. presidency, again, in a time when you still have people alive who lived through the segregation era, certainly represents, some degree of advance. But we should also remember that Black Lives Matter movement started while Obama was president. So we should be really clear that as much as having representation in areas where historically there has not been, including all the way to the U.S. presidency, that does not eliminate what are some of the ongoing issues that even President Obama noted that his election did not resolve. And so while we are appreciative of these first, to me, more critically, is also acknowledging and recognizing the ongoing challenges, and that those challenges can't be dismissed and have to still be confronted and still addressed. And so I think, that's and that's the case, I think, for communities around the world. Being the first woman, being the first LGBTQ person in certain circumstances represents an advance of sorts. But again, the issues don't go away with just one person or even a group of people representing a particular community and the issues that that community face.
And so just following that, I think from Mohammed Rahim Shah, would you say that Vice President Kamala Harris election is in the same vein?
Well, first let me say Kamala Harris graduated from Howard University. And in fact, she was in my department. So just to kind of note that. But yeah, in a similar way, again, having her rise and her background, not only as a Black person, but as someone of Indian heritage, and as the first woman vice president, are all notable. And they do reflect how all of those communities have been engaged in fight for inclusion and representation. But again, to echo what I just said about Obama, I think the same thing still applies, that the issues remain, and to the degree this representation may help is welcome, but insufficient. And it still requires the hard work of getting policies or getting laws or finding ways to address these issues that go beyond just one particular individual.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain, and thanks to the audience for your questions. We've just about reached the end of the program. I'd like to ask for closing comments from our speakers. Dr. Hussain, if you would lead off.
So first, let me say I really, really enjoyed the questions that people asked. They were really thoughtful, and these are questions that we're wrestling with every single day. Secondly, again, want to underscore Dr. Sigika's remarks about the power of narrative and storytelling, and that really is a central component of what we do in trying to address these concerns. And I thank her deeply for her brilliance on those issues.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. And now I'd like to give the final word to Dr. Siddiqa.
Thank you very much, Professor Hussain. And I'm glad that when we're talking about storytelling and sharing stories, we are doing it together here, where we not only tell our own stories, but we also share our stories with each other. So that's very important. Thank you very much for your very insightful talk. I'm so happy you were with us today. You've been with us today, and our students also got another perspective on things that we teach them. I would also like to thank the U.S. Embassy, Jose Defer, Ms. Angela Ackler, Vice Chancellor, Quaid-I-Azam University, and special thanks to Paul Kiblin, Public Diplomacy Officer, U.S. Embassy Islamabad, and Shahid Wasim, Country Alumni Coordinator, who could not be with us, for organizing this, as well as Usman Siddiq and Aaron for making this possible. And thank you to the faculty and students of Area Study Center, Quaid-I-Azam, and Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network members for attending this very important discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqa. And that does bring us to the end of our program. If I can get a virtual round of applause for our speakers. Again, a special thanks for Dr. Hussain for staying up so late. It's what, it's 1:30 in the morning? Gosh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's fine. Thank you so much.
So thank you to Quaid-I-Azam University for co-sponsoring the event. If you are interested in this, please check our social media networks and those associated with the university. The embassy and the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network will have tape versions of the program up very shortly. Black History Month starts officially next week. We hope this program and its discussion starts a good month and more conversation for all of us. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.